Okay, in this video, we will be talking about section 1.5, which is all about bias in sampling. Now, this is largely going to be stuff that you intuitively know. We're just, yet again, going to be putting a name on it. And this will conclude our chapter. We won't be going into 1.6. We'll be ending on 1.5. So, without further ado, let's dive in. First off, what is bias? We say that a population has bias if it is not representative of the entire population. Now, for instance, this could be like the examples I was bringing up earlier. If I'm asking about the approval of the Yankees, and I'm trying to get info about the entire U.S. population, but I ask only Red Sox fans, that's not a good deal. If I ask about, say, the approval rating of a sitting president, I'm sure I should not ask people of the other party. That's just not going to work out. Now, bias can actually occur in three different sources. First off, it can recur in sampling bias. Second off, it can occur in non-response bias. And third, it can occur in response bias. Let's dive in. Sampling bias. Sampling bias means the technique used to obtain the sample's individuals tends to favor one part of the population over the other. As you see in my next bullet point, convenience sampling is the key contributor to this. Yeah, you do not want to favor one group over the other. You want a representative sample that gives you information. Now, this can result due to undercoverage, where one segment of the population is underrepresented proportionally speaking, which can be caused by a couple things. First off, it can be caused by ignorance. Let's say that I go on Harvard's campus and start asking about, say, the average wealth of people's parents. Now, there are clearly people that earned their way to Harvard via the merits on their own, and there are amazing stories that you guys should all dive into. It's really cool seeing it. But typically, if you're going to Harvard, it's because you had a pretty good education. Therefore, you would assume that some parents are a little bit more well off than, say, others. And the majority of students, I would probably assume something like that. Like I said, no way indicative of every single student there, nor would I ever claim that. But that could be under coverage. I'm not getting the entire American's population to report on, say, their parents' wealth in that case. Another way that could come up would be bad frames. If I don't have everybody in the population listed, I'm not going to be able to poll everybody. For instance, if I ask Twitter users, what are your ideas on and thoughts on Twitter, it's probably going to be a little bit more positive than if I had included those people that don't partake in Twitter. You know, you're getting some bias in that type of setup. Now, why is this bad? It leads to bad predictions. If you don't have all the information, well, you're not going to get most of the answers. Now, this is different than non-response bias. Well, it turns out people who don't respond just might have different opinions. And by the way, most every survey suffers from this. As an example, if I put out a poll that's wanting people to either say they approve or disapprove of Chick-fil-A, if you approve of it, you're probably a Chick-fil-A fan, right? But typically, Chick-fil-A fans will be more wanting to participate in that survey. Yeah, I got some Chick-fil-A pride. Boom. Participate in that survey. Maybe the people that didn't participate, well, maybe they don't really like it as much, or at least are apathetic towards Chick-fil-A, which would be information we want to know. So even by just not responding, that's a form of bias. That's why surveys suffer for this. Imagine all the surveys that you get sent in your email. How many of those do you reply? Blah, blah, blah. How many of those do you respond to? Well, probably not a lot if you're like me. Non-response bias. Now, by the way, how can you control for this one? We didn't talk about that last one. Let's talk about how you can control for non-response bias. Well, if you want, you could just nag people. You could do callbacks, meaning ask those who did not return the survey to do so. Hey, I noticed that you did not complete our survey. It would be very beneficial to our organization if you did so. Okay, fine. Boop. Do the survey. That's a way to get people to respond. Just nag at them. Another way would be rewards. Hey, you could be a winner of an Amazon gift card if you participate in our survey. Well, that usually gets me to do it. So callbacks and rewards are ways to help with response rate. Now, interestingly enough, just like you can have non-response bias where individuals choose not to respond, thereby leaving out their opinion, which might be important, you could also get response bias. Now, response bias exists when the answers on a survey do not reflect the true feelings of the respondent. This can occur in a lot of ways. It can occur through interviewer error, me screwing up the question. It could occur through misrepresented answers. Hey, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like working out? Oh, 10, 100%. Okay, you probably don't actually like that, but you're trying to like exaggerate a little bit, make yourself feel good. Wording of questions. Well, it turns out wording can be a little bit tricky. So you got to almost think like a lawyer when you're asking this. If I say corner you into an opinion, well, that's going to be giving me some response bias where the respondent is feeling a little pressure maybe. Ordering of questions is very similar to this. Ordering of questions can actually cause response bias in the following manner. Hey, how much do you feel the need and the desire to support those that are less well off? Well, most people would say yeah. Okay, how would you vote for, say, a busing proposal where you provide kind of bus vouchers for people to get around? Well, since I already answered yes, I like to support the less well off, well, that makes natural sense. I would do that. By ordering that question where I've put a thought in your head, you might respond differently to that second one. For instance, if I switch it, well, maybe all of a sudden it becomes about spending to you, and you wouldn't necessarily want to do that. Ordering of questions matters. Also, types of questions. Open versus closed questions is a big deal. Which one to use in specific spots is very important. Closed questions typically help you kind of put people in baskets, which can be useful, but it also eliminates a lot of the nuance. There's no gray area. Last but not least, data entry error. If you just take the response and you enter it poorly, that can cause response bias. Interesting question. Can a census be biased? Well, recall first off that a census is a list of individuals in a population along with certain characteristics of each individual. Turns out bias can still arise when conducting a census, which is kind of crazy. How can it How can it arise? Well, turns out it's kind of a cheap answer, but bias in a census can arise if you have a poor frame. So if you don't know everybody in your population and you think you're doing a census, that's where bias can arise from. Where can a poor frame happen? Well, poor frames can happen if they are obtained only periodically, but the population, meanwhile, is changing constantly. Think about how many people are coming in and out of the United States, and we're only getting data every 10 years. Probably don't have everybody listed. Censuses can also be biased. Now, last but not least, as you see, we're almost done. Sampling error versus non-sampling error. Well, let's talk about the difference. Non-response bias, response bias, and data entry errors are types of non-sampling errors. Sampling errors, on the other hand, result from using a sample to estimate information about a population. So that is when we're using a sample, and these errors can occur due to the incomplete nature of samples, meaning you don't have good representation. It can't extrapolate perfect information from a sample, so hey, when you're taking a sample, you are not going to get the same data you would as if you took it from the whole population. And you will have a sampling error when you use convenience sampling. Convenience is a horrible way to do things. When doing a sample, try your best to avoid these types of errors or these types of biases they will jade your opinion as to what the actual population is up to, and it will give you incorrect information as to what the population thinks. So it's important to keep all of these in mind. Even something as subtle as ordering of questions. Switching up the question order is a really important thing to do, it turns out. With this, go ahead and try your homework. Email me if you have any questions. Read the textbook on this stuff. And best of luck to y'all. See y'all next time.